What advice do you generally try to give to the young entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs early in their journey as you talk to those?
I think it kind of depends on kind of the room that you're in, certainly. But one thing that I kind of touched on a little bit earlier is, I think when you're a teenager in your 20s, that's a time to try a lot of different things, whether it's travel or it's different business ideas, different, career paths. But it's when you get a little bit older and you find that thing that's kind of your fit and really, it doesn't feel like work. That's the time to really focus. And that's kind of what we did. In our earlier years, we talked about, I used to do some video stuff, and we actually used to do events too. We had this sports league and we used to do concerts and had a lot of fun with that. Try lots of things and see what's the fit.
All right, Colton, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Blake.
So I think it's important that we start with you telling me a little bit about Lads in the Wild and why that's such an important tradition.
Well, for me and my friends that I got close with after college in my 20s, we're pretty spread out across Canada at this point, all across the country. And we started a tradition quite a while back where we all commit to coming home to the East Coast, to Atlantic, Canada, where I'm from. Once a summer, we all get together for 3 or 4 days kind of off grid. And kind of as we have all grown up and, our careers developed and, stresses and that sort of thing mount, it's really something that we look forward to. It's one of the highlights of the year. I say Christmas in the summer for us. So a few nights away, excited. All my friends will be kind of flying in from across the country, and we are headed to Cape Breton for a weekend of camping. We're really excited.
Yeah, I know it's one of those things that I definitely don't get together. It's a rare tradition nowadays for sure. I see it, and I'm envious in your yearly recap on Instagram or Facebook, wherever it happens to land. But I know a lot of guys sort of struggle to maintain friendships sort of across distance and time, like you're saying. Seemingly, you've still got this group of about 10 or 15 guys or so together that still sort of participate in this tradition. Is there anything that you can sort of point to as a reason why the lads are still together?
Well, I mean, I think, there's a lot of studies that point to the fact that, millennials are, one of the loneliest generations, especially as we've gotten older. We live in this hyper-connected world where we're connected via technology, but, the average person's number of true friends has actually decreased by each decade as time's gone by. And for us, I think one of the things that drew us together, that made us really good friends, and like I said, it was after college. I think when we grow up, we all have those friends that grew up on our street, or that, we were friends of convenience with in high school because we were in the same place, and, perhaps we had similar interests. For me and, the guys that I'm closest with, I think a big part of it is that we didn't just become friends because we were necessarily in the same place. We actually shared a lot of common interests. Yeah, and listen, I'm a really lucky guy that, especially because just life has gotten so busy with work and professional kind of commitments over the past few years, that it's something that, we've been able to kind of keep together and keep doing. And yeah, it's really an opportunity for us to recharge. I think it's something that, whenever you do have the opportunity, to, I guess, get away from technology for a few days with people that you really care about. Yeah, it's great kind of for your energy and recharges the batteries.
Yeah, I think I read something, I don't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, about the fact that since like 1980, the number of guys who report having like any sort of close friendships at all has gone from I don't remember what the number was, but to almost like 40% of guys saying that they have zero close friends. So it's definitely a struggle.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of factors that play into it, but you got to think that, the emergence of smartphones, like technology, has played a part of it. I think it's something that we have to put a lot more kind of emphasis on, and, checking in with your friends, yeah. So like I said, I'm a pretty lucky guy. We look forward to it all year, and, Christmas in July is coming up. The weather forecast isn't looking so good this year. It's always a bit of a roll of the dice. But over the years, we've kind of gone upmarket with our Airbnbs and the lake houses. So we have lots of space inside as well.
We sort of got connected through a mutual friend based on both of our common interests at the time, pulling on that thread of travel and videography at the time. What sort of prompted your journey into videography, I guess?
That's an interesting story, one that I haven't thought about in a while. And I think it's intrinsically it's tied to the travel thing. I had just finished college, and I worked a corporate job for a while that was pretty satisfying. It was a temporary contract, and after a 3-month period, I had an opportunity presented for a full-time permanent position. And I was a marketing grad, and I had what I thought was the marketing grad's dream job. It was great pay, it was engaging people to work with, and cool projects. At the time, I still had this kind of side business that I had been building since high school that I did at night. And I always told myself that I wanted to go travel and backpack. And I had a couple friends that were chatting about a trip going down south, and they ended up dropping out. So I was kind of faced with a bit of a fork in the road one night if I was going to take this permanent contract and work in the corporate world. And I decided to say thanks, but no thanks, and took a little bit of time off for myself. And I booked a one-way ticket to Central America. I left 24 hours after I turned 21 on a one-way ticket to Nicaragua. Didn't speak any Spanish, still don't. A little bit. And it was actually funny. A couple of days before, a friend had just mentioned, they said, I've got a GoPro. I don't really use it much. You're welcome to take it on your trip if you want. And it's a long time ago. Social media wasn't really where it is now. Like Instagram, I think it was like a 15-second time cap, and I had a blast. Traveling Nicaragua, Honduras, and making these absolutely horrible quality, like 15-second videos for Instagram. Cut to music that I liked at the time. And you kind of get caught in that positive feedback loop, and you're having a lot of fun with it. And over time, is when I got back from that trip, I made the jump to working for myself full time, and I started working in my parents' basement, and then we eventually got a rundown shop. We're in screen printing and embroidery now. And we were in a very cyclical business where it would be very busy in the summer and the fall, but in the dead of winter in January, February, March, it'd be super, super quiet. So I had a pretty fun thing going for a few years where during those really quiet months, I had the opportunity to go travel and backpack. And one thing kind of leads to another. You jump from the crappy GoPro to a slightly better phone, and then everyone gets a Canon Rebel at one point. Everyone probably remembers that time. And then eventually I became a Sony guy. I had an A7S Mark II. And that pretty well takes me into probably around kind of the time period that we met. I'd been traveling in Asia and Thailand and surrounding countries for a while, and became friends with some hostel owners. Because literally I was just at their hostel making these videos for fun. And as a lot of folks that have kind of traveled that area, a lot of Westerners over there, some pretty cool party hostel brands, and eventually just kind of got to the point that I could pay for my trips, and established relationships with some chains across Southeast Asia, and they'd bring me out for video projects. And I think that's around the time that we would have met. So had a ton of fun. It wasn't the forever job by any means, but yeah, it kind of ties in with the travel. Don't get to do it as much as I like anymore. How about you? Kind of on the flip side of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think mine was also very similar to your situation, maybe a little bit prompted prior to the trip, but I told this story in a newsletter a couple weeks ago of how I sort of got into videography and wanting to travel and all that. And I remember watching, and this kind of comes full circle to the concert that I was at last weekend, but I ended up watching a video must have been in 2017, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, and it's Sam Colder's My Year 2016 video. And I remember watching that video, and the soundtrack to that video is Elenium's Reverie. And I don't know.
I remember the exact video and the exact song that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody who was into the travel videography at that time knows what that video is. So it's kind of cool that everybody has that sort of shared this is what got me started thing. But yeah, it was definitely that video. And from there, I started picking up some videography stuff from people like Roy Kramer or who was the big GoPro guy at the time? His name was Chris something. Anyways, got into sort of photography, videography as a hobby. I immediately picked up an A6300 was my first camera, and then just sort of rolled from there. Figured I wanted to go travel, sort of same situation as you, was doing marketing in a not so corporate position, but in a full-time marketing position, and said, hey, I'm going to sort of bet on myself here and go travel and see if I can't make it on my own here for a few months at least, and get put up by some hostels, and then sort of the rest was history.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those skill sets that can take you so many different places and open so many different doors. You know, what it really meant to me was the opportunity to, you know, whether it was shooting at concerts or, you know, visiting these interesting places that you never would have had an opportunity, you know, to be in those rooms before, opens a ton of doors. And while over time I had to kind of move on to other things, business wise, I actually have a brother who's about 7 years younger, and he's actually a full-time videographer now. So he's done the Asia thing a few times, and he's really taken it and run with it.
Definitely the same for me. It for sure opened some doors and has definitely had some transferable skills to some of my other areas of the marketing world now, even if only to know what I need in sort of a videography or photography partner, or when I'm looking to hire out a contractor or something for that at this point. That yeah, it's definitely been a very helpful and transferable skill to have had. I watched through some of your 2018 videos or 2019 videos the other day on Instagram, and it sort of fully brought me back to that time period. Like, how special is it to create those and know you'll have sort of like this highlight reel from that period of your life in 30 years?
It's really neat, and you don't necessarily realize at the time the significance that it's going to have. But yeah, it's something where I don't go back super often to watch those, but the interesting thing with videography as kind of an art form is there's, you know, you're really able to capture a feeling sometimes in a way that you can't with a static photo. And yeah, it's definitely brings you back to a time and captures a feeling. So yeah, looking back, and there's a few years where I'd done the year recap videos, and, you know, it kind of just shows you over time kind of the progression and changes in your life. The other thing that I do that is really meaningful to me is each year at the end of the year, I'll actually take all my favorite photos, whether it's people, places, or things, and I get them made up into like just a photo book with Vistaprint. You know, and I'm sure there's lots of other sites that do them. So I've got a stack of those, you know, going back I think 6 or 7 years on my shelf at home in my bedroom, and I would probably say those are probably some of my most prized possessions. I don't think it's a thing if my house is burning down, I'm going to grab those because I can get them reprinted. But they, it kind of in a similar way, you know, you kind of go back and look at those memories, and I think it's kind of like it's a good way to kind of practice gratitude, you know, looking back and, you know, all those, you know, we get caught up in, you know, the stress and kind of the work cycle and everything, and it's easy to forget, you know, all the good times. So yeah, both video and photo, really cool skill set, you know, whether it's to make money, discover new experiences, and also just to kind of capture those memories and be able to look back on.
For sure. I got, for Christmas, I got my wife now one of the digital picture frames. You can't see this on the bar over there in the corner, but it's one of those things where it serves the same purpose, right? You get all yours printed and put in a book so that you can look at them more often. But I think that the digital picture frame really helped for us too, is just being able to throw some pictures on there and like you say, be able to relive them in the moment instead of having to pull your phone out and scroll through your phone and sort of disconnect that way a little bit. So it's been nice.
Yeah, exactly. And that is kind of the, you know, the challenge when it comes to media, kind of like on your phone and devices. It's like, how do you actually enjoy it without, you know, the ping of the notifications?
Yeah.
Because I feel like so many of our devices now are designed to distract us and to take us out of the moment. I think one of the cool things with if you're shooting video at a concert or something like that, you're in the moment and taking it in.
What's the biggest life lesson you picked up while traveling?
If there's a single thing, I think, especially solo travel, really helps you start to understand who you are. I think it was after my 21st birthday when I went on that first solo trip, and like that was kind of when I came into my own. It's when you're a couple thousand miles from anyone who knows your name. You really have to kind of take a look at yourself and start to understand who you are. I think it makes you comfortable, developing new relationships and sort of thing in a way that you really don't get, growing up in Canada in a lot of ways, especially in a small town like where I'm from on the East Coast, or when you go to university, you're very much, your social network is, based on the people that you're just kind of put in the same place as. So I think it's those social skills. It's taking a hard look at kind of understanding who you are and who you want to be, and just being open to new experiences. I think that's, it's one of those things that makes life worth living. And, I guess we all have the same, similar number of days on this earth, or I guess a similar number of hours in the day. And it's like, how are you going to use them?
I think that was definitely something for me. Like you say, those friends of convenience from earlier on in your life, and then deciding who you want to be, and traveling puts you in a situation to be able to not only present yourself in a way that you want other people to see you, but also puts you in uncomfortable situations that you wouldn't otherwise be in, to sort of allow another side of you to come out. So,
and I think that kind of like getting to a point where you can be comfortable with putting yourself into your comfort zone, that's a muscle that, you have to kind of work at, it's a skill to grow. And I think it's something that, as time's gone by, has really helped me on kind of the professional side of my life as an entrepreneur. Because certainly, I started our company pretty young. It's been a series of kind of risks, as we've gone on and we've grown. And I think like I said, it's kind of a muscle that you grow. And traveling is really one of those things that, like, if you don't have a set career path after high school, something that you're really, truly passionate about, I think a lot of people would benefit from taking a bit of time off before they just jump into university or something like that. My brother did the same thing. He actually, shortly before he graduated high school, he went to Asia to backpack for the first time. And I think, I can certainly say that, through my travels, I definitely learned more in terms of social skills and kind of those soft skills than I probably did throughout my years at college.
For sure.
I didn't learn Photoshop like I did in college, but the soft skills, you learn in those places.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are more important anyways, especially like you're talking about on your entrepreneurial journey. It's one of those, the university of life sort of deals instead of actually going and taking courses. So
yeah, exactly.
So you've alluded to it a couple times now, but we'll get into your story as an entrepreneur here at Stay Golden Custom Clothing. And you sort of started this company by accident in your senior year of high school. Where did that idea originate from? And can you tell me a little bit about how that sort of got off the ground? So
we celebrated our 11-year anniversary earlier this year. Time flies when you're having fun. And, kind of the origins of the company, kind of like you mentioned, we're kind of accidental entrepreneurs, and started in my senior year of high school. We had a sporting event that we were managing, and there's, a sponsor hadn't came through, and, there's a need for shirts for the winners. And, myself and a few friends, put together this idea of a company and started this retail clothing brand called Stay Golden Custom at, pretty small scale. Sold our own t-shirts and crew neck sweaters out of our backpacks in the student council office. And, it was in the year after that, my two original partners had moved on to other things, and I bought them out, that we started getting these small little requests, Facebook messages for sets of custom hoodies or jackets or something for, say, a hockey team or a school group. And at that time, we didn't have our own printing presses, but, we'd design it and we'd ship it in, and we'd get, a print shop to print it. And that's just something that kind of just became my continual little side hustle, when I went through my college years. And it was never really supposed to be, the main thing. I do come from a family of entrepreneurs, and that's kind of, the environment that I grew up in. I think if you were to ask me in high school if someday I'd work for myself, probably. I don't think anyone, including myself, thought that the little t-shirt thing we did in grade 12 was going to be the career. Funny how those things work out. But yeah, so, it just became this consistent thing that became more and more steady, and it was that time after college, right around when I started traveling, that I decided to kind of make that gamble and kind of bet on myself. And I liked the odds, to try to make a go of it. And that meant taking, a loan for some equipment. My parents are very supportive, but nothing's free in our household. So I was able to borrow the same 10 grand from my parents 3 times with interest each time. Nothing's free. But they let me set up the equipment and print in their basement. I wasn't even living at home at the time. I just needed shop space. And, I was there for probably 6 months. I think they were pretty sick of me, because I'd print till like 3, 4 a.m. You go through, every entrepreneur kind of goes through that, that there's some pretty tough months and years of, when you're pretty well running as one person, and in our business, there's always deadlines. So I was the marketing, I was the sales, and I was also production. But pretty soon, we got to the point that, I say it was just a one-man show at that point, but moved to a shared workspace in a loft above my favorite coffee shop in downtown Charlottetown. And then eventually, it's probably about a year after that, we were ready kind of for our own shop space and had hired our first employee, and moved to it was a Kijiji listing that my parents had sent me, and I didn't take seriously at the beginning. It kind of looked like a bit of a dump, but it was a garage in the north end of Charlottetown. A little rough around the edges, but that was, it was the first real physical location for the business. It's probably like 2014, 2015 at that time. And, eventually the team grew, and we renovated it and spruced it up a bit, and then eventually took over the second floor of that building. And then, as kind of the company grew, and I think the company grew up as we did as well. We started with sports teams and schools and stuff. And then over time, now our focus is definitely working with kind of brands. We do a lot of breweries, corporate, CrossFit gyms and that sort of thing. And eventually it would have been 2020, we had got to the point that our lease was coming up and we needed more space. So we actually bought our own facility. We moved about 15 minutes outside the city in Charlottetown, and we've been in the same building ever since. It was a pretty cool setup for the first couple of years. The shop was actually on the bottom level, and I had a condo on the second level. So it's one of those things where work never has to stop. I can go all the time. But eventually, we needed more space, and we'd actually approached the neighbors about buying their building, but they weren't interested. So last fall, with some pretty big equipment purchases on the way and nowhere to put them, I had to evict myself from the condo. So I moved out, and then the company took over the second floor, and we busted down a bunch of walls, put in a boardroom, some office space, and I'm actually sitting in what was once my bedroom. That's now our boardroom now. So yeah, there's about 10 of us now. We're having a lot of fun, growing pretty quick, and trying to kind of transition from being just a Prince Edward Island based company to one that's maritime and Atlantic Canadian wide. And a big chunk of our sales are now across Eastern Canada. So it's been a really fun process. And certainly over this past few years, as the company's gotten more mature and the team's grown, having a lot of fun with it.
That's good. It's one of those things where you probably wouldn't still be doing it if you weren't having fun with it. So
it's kind of the thing, like, you really have to be passionate about it. I have a few friends that are a bit earlier, in their entrepreneurial journey, and yeah, like any rational person would probably drop an idea after a few years, when you're 3-4 years in and making less than minimum wage because you're working around the clock. But, I really think that it's, the freedom that it gives you, is something that, is really hard to find in other places. And it, it's just for a lot of people, it's kind of in the space that we're in, it gives us an opportunity to be creative and work with clients that we really like. It's just it's really fulfilling, and we have a lot of fun with it.
For sure. I think I'm on my, I don't know, third or fourth iteration of whatever this entrepreneurial journey is now. So, I mean, at one point I even tried to do clothing. This is one of only 2 pieces of clothing that I ever printed
Nice.
for myself, but I don't, let me say, I don't want your entrepreneurial journey. I'll stay out of the heavily competitive market that is clothing, but no, for sure. It's like I said, this is my third or fourth try at this entrepreneurial thing, and each time I've tried it so far, there's always like an interest, but there's never really the love of it. And I think I've finally found something, at least I hope, that is sort of finally filling that. I really love this, and I could do this if I wasn't getting paid for that. So starting
Awesome.
this
That's what you
podcast was
want.
part of that. And for sure, I just really love having conversations with interesting people, and doesn't feel like work. And I love getting to talk to interesting people. So I was planning on starting the podcast 2 years ago, as is always the case. You always wish you did the thing sooner, but here we are. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's one of those things that, you mentioned kind of a couple different iterations. I think that, especially your earlier 20s is the time to try a lot of different ideas, and to see what sticks, and it's, when you, as time goes by, you find that thing that you're really passionate about, like what you talked about, that, it doesn't feel like work, and when you're able to, find that thing and then find what you can monetize at the same time, then, you probably got something with legs.
There's something to be said about sort of the way you went about growing your business, and a lot of the way that entrepreneurship online today is glorified as, how can I build this thing, monetize as fast as possible, raise $5 million and then sell for like 50. How do you feel when you see that contrasted with the way that that you built your business from sort of the ground up incrementally, as you said? I'll leave that open-ended.
Yeah, I try to stay away from, kind of that whole sphere of the internet, the entrepreneurial hustle culture on Instagram. It's not really us. I think we took we're a bit more, not, I wouldn't say conservative with risk over time, but we really tried to be aware of not overextending ourselves. In 2015, I was a part of a startup accelerator for tech-oriented companies on the East Coast called Propel ICT. And that really exposed me to that startup world and seeking out venture capital and that sort of thing. And being through that program for, I think it was somewhere between 10 and 15 weeks, actually really cemented for me that wasn't what we wanted, high, super, super fast growth with VC funding, but with, a lot of companies blowing up or going bankrupt. For us, it's been about, creating something that will last. We want to create, I think it's good that, we're creating something good for our community. We want to be a great place to work for our staff. And I guess also just like, we would rather grow a bit slower, than, perhaps some of these VC funded rocket ships in the print on demand space. But actually maintain a good quality of life for us. I think there's a good balance. So for us, like we've been, more measured with our growth. We had our biggest expansion kind of to date in the last year. We made some pretty big investments in automating our screen print division and a lot of our pre-production. So we've got more comfortable with that risk over time, as the team's gotten bigger and more mature and management's got more mature. But I think it's something that, you look at a lot of the content online and the YouTube gurus, they glorified it. It's not about, the luxury goods or cars or anything like that. Anyone who's done this and who's been in it for 10 years knows that, there's a lot more late nights and it's anything but glamorous. Like I said, our first office was pretty rough around the edges. But for us, that starting in the basement, starting in the garage, it was a bit of a badge of honor. We wanted to do it step by step, and take our time. But listen, every journey is different. over the last year, I've been a part of a program at the University of New Brunswick called the Wallace McCain Institute, which is it's almost like an MBA for entrepreneurs. And they take 15 entrepreneurs from Atlantic Canada each year, all different ages, all different areas, and all different types of companies and stages of growth. And through that program over the last year, getting really close with those people, there's 1,000 different ways, to get to, where you may want to be as an entrepreneur. And, sometimes that's with external funding. Sometimes it's not. I think we're pretty lucky that there was a lower barrier to entry, in our industry where we didn't have to go seeking funding right away. That's not the case in every industry, some that are more capital intensive. But yeah, I think, there's a lot of different ways to get there. But we're pretty grateful that, we didn't have to go seek any major outside funding and sell off equity in the business.
So like you said, and I saw that you had posted a bit about your involvement in the Wallace McCain Institute on Instagram. It was a couple weeks back now. Can you speak a little bit to the importance of being in the same room with other like-minded people?
Absolutely. There's a quote I heard once that I think it's that, you become the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And, I think as our lives get a lot busier, as, you get a bit older, it's really important to be intentional with your time and who you're spending it with. So, over the last year, getting to join the Wallace McCain Institute and their Entrepreneurial Leaders Program, it's been really meaningful and impactful for me. And something that's pretty neat about their approach is that they look at entrepreneurship as something where you're never actually going to be able to divide just your work life and your personal life. There's never going to be that perfect balance. So they take a one life approach where, within our sessions, everything's on the table, and, they operate under kind of confidentiality, so people are actually able to be, open, which is something that you probably wouldn't find at the Chamber of Commerce or, a traditional MBA program. But I think for entrepreneurs, it can be a really isolating journey, and even when times are good, something that a lot of us notice is that, as you get further along that journey, it actually can kind of feel more and more isolating, and I look at my friends around me that, have great careers, engineers and, in different industries. But, kind of when it comes to entrepreneurship, you deal with a lot of, unique challenges that you're not particularly able to really talk to a lot of the people around you about. So I think it's, for people that have gone that path, it's really important and really valuable to find a peer group that you can talk to about that stuff. And sometimes it's informal, sometimes it's more structured. But for me, the Wallace McCain Institute's been that, and it's been really transformational for our company and, for me personally.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of in that first early stage of that entrepreneurial section here. I'm in sort of the same place of looking at a bunch of my friends doing whatever else they're doing, like you say, in their various careers, and obviously still have my day job at this point, but starting to branch out and learn how to actually go about surrounding myself with some of these people. So it was definitely good that we got to connect, and we'll have to maybe make sure to keep in touch more often as I go along this journey here. But I recently joined a little bit of an online class sort of thing to, again, participate in a little bit of that, being surrounded by people who are on the same journey, and that's definitely been super helpful. So
yeah, absolutely. It really does make all the difference. And one thing that's really nice is that, one of the benefits of this hyper-connected world that we're in is that you're able to connect with people in different cities that are doing similar things. So for us, while kind of on the entrepreneurial side and just general business, WMI has been that, on the kind of the screen printing and the clothing side, through going to trade shows in the States, there's, Long Beach is a big one in our industry. Myself and, our management team, we've actually got the chance to, become pretty good friends with some other shop owners across Canada. And it's cool that, whether you're in a space like photography or videography, marketing or screen printing, I think that's been something that's really helped our business, because we're in different cities in Canada and pretty spaced out, but we're able to kind of, keep in touch, and kind of help kind of coach and troubleshoot problems that we have on kind of both sides. Shout outs Coastal Rain. But yeah, it's exciting times in that way.
I'm sure there were a few people earlier on in your career that sort of looked at you a little bit confused when they were meeting with a teenager to talk business. Was there
Still
anything
do.
that I'm sure that was my next
Still,
point.
still working on the
Yeah,
mustache and the
yeah,
facial
yeah,
hair.
yeah.
Yeah.
Was there
When you're on the wrong
anything
side of 25, the baby face starts to, be a good thing.
for sure? Was there anything that sort of helped you overcome any of those funny looks that you've had as sort of a young founder as you've become more successful here?
I think you overcompensate, when you're young to try to be taken seriously. Like if I look back at, when I was in that startup accelerator in 2015, I look at the pitches and it's like, I'm trying to use all these big words, then eventually you learn it's like, how do you explain things as simple as possible, in as few words as possible? That's actually, having mastery of something. I think it's something where there's inherent advantage in starting early. And if there's anyone listening to this that, thinks that journey may be for them, or that, they have an idea, the sooner the better. It's really something where as time's gone by, we've come to realize that one of our biggest advantages is that we started, early, and like most things in life, progress compounds over time. It's kind of that constant iteration that I think's been the biggest kind of thing that's helped us improve. Kind of bouncing all around here, but does that answer the question? I danced around it a bit.
You mentioned it briefly, but you've sort of made some massive investments in yourself in the last couple of years in the form of new equipment and new space. And how hard is it to sort of develop that bet on yourself mentality as you sort of started just after you finished up your college career?
Well, 11 years and counting. I guess for us, like I said earlier, we try to be quite measured when we make those investments. And it's typically it's based on customer feedback. We have been growing really fast over the past few years. I think there was a year we're over 70% growth and over 90% growth in sales. I think we're between 50 and 60 this last year. And that's, trying to be conservative with our growth. Last year was really interesting. It was a marathon. And something that we've come to realize is as an organization gets bigger, with each step, it does get much more complex. So for us, that meant that the timeline in ordering this equipment was quite a bit longer than we were used to. It wasn't something where you order it, it would show up in a few weeks. It was actually, I think it was 7-8 months. And part of that is, the supply chain with COVID. I think they were short one chip on the giant machine, so it didn't ship for months. But then having to have the walls moved by the time that landed and all the different subcontractors associated with that, and flying out technicians to do the install and the training. And actually even recently in May, we flew out a consultant from Ontario to help train and coach some of our operators on kind of how to, increase our capacity and our efficiency with the machines. So as time's gone by, certainly the projects have got bigger, longer, more complicated, many, many lists and action items. And it can be a little tricky when it gets to that size. I'm someone who does love those lists that, break down a project step by step and how do we get it done, in a few weeks so we can check it off and get the little hit of dopamine. But as when you're working on, these big complicated projects, and with so many components, whether it's, again, the physical machinery, the renovations needed, or, new hires associated with that, the standard operating procedures, it's certainly been a new experience. And also kind of as, the workload outgrows an individual, and transitioning to kind of a full management team perspective, it's been a big learning experience over the last, I'll say a year and a half now. We've been going through this process, and we're forever thinking that we're done, the kind of the growth and the expansion. But it's kind of this game where you build more capacity and then sales is catching up. You're trying to kind of always have that balance, without overextending yourself, when it comes to staffing and spending. With this recession that we've been told for the last year is supposed to be here, we're still not seeing it. Things are busier than ever, but also just trying to be aware, in going through this growth phase that, with interest rates going up and, are things going to start cooling off, and, how do we make ourselves recession proof or resistant, in a way that all our, our people are, secure and that sort of thing, and that we can weather that. That was what COVID was supposed to be. But, we ended up busier than ever. We also got face masks, and we pivoted pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about the recession-proof mentality and not getting out too far over your skis, and that's what that slow growth allows you to do. I think especially given that we've been talking about some of the glorification of entrepreneurial success online, and a lot of young guys are sort of wading into this water of, is entrepreneurship for them? And most of everything you see online is sort of these just like chain of success after success after success. And from your story, obviously we've talked about the slow growth, and probably hasn't led to some of the catastrophic failures that you see where companies just blow up, or when you were talking earlier about the VC funding and companies just exploding and going to zero. But I know that entrepreneurial journeys are not without challenges or learning opportunities. So what's maybe one mistake or learning opportunity that you've had in your entrepreneurial journey that might be of use to a younger guy or girl who's looking to get into something like this?
We have them every day. We're in an industry where, to produce a project for a client, there's 1,000 different variables. There's important timelines, and as we've grown, there's always going to be challenges. I think the one takeaway, is that, every, challenge or, failure is something that it's a learning opportunity. So we actually try to view these things that, if a mistake is made on an order, it's not a people problem, it's actually a process problem. So we try to look at, anytime we have a mistake or we're fixing something, first off, we go above and beyond to make it right for the client. And loyalty is actually built in resolution is something that someone in our industry has said, and I really resonated with me. But it's one of those things that every time you make a mistake, it's an opportunity to actually look at what is our process around this, and how do we ensure that's airtight in the future and document it, so that we can actually do this on autopilot the same way and have a process each time, to ensure it doesn't happen again. They're all just learning, it's all just education. Sometimes it's more expensive. You're going to get your education whether you pay for it in school or you pay for it in mistakes that you make in your career. The jury's still out on what you're going to spend more on. They're not going to give you student loans for the expensive mistakes that you make in entrepreneurship. But yeah, I mean that would be the takeaway. I think, yeah.
Where or when, I read it exactly, but something to the effect of, without a standard operating procedure, you don't have a company, you just have a job. So being able to put things into procedures to make things repeatable that's a fantastic takeaway for sure. Yeah.
And something that I came to realize is that, for the first kind of half of our company's history, it's, I was self-employed, and we had a small team, but the company didn't run if I wasn't here. Everything, it comes to a point where you have to get all that knowledge out of a founder's head, and it has to get down on paper and become processes, or you don't have a company, you have the golden handcuffs. And I think a lot of companies get trapped, in that kind of area, and it's delegation never came naturally to me. I'm someone that, typically would have my hands in everything, and my staff will
Join
tell
the
you
club.
that.
Join
Yeah.
the club.
But I would say this last 3 years in particular has been, a time when there's been a shift in terms of, I specifically actually try to take myself out of a lot of processes. And you have to do that. You have to be, we have great people, that are motivated and great at their jobs, and it's something where I just have to get it out of the way, equip them with right information, trust them, and, the right process. And that is, it's a slow process with lots of challenges bit by bit, as you go through it. But, that is the cost of freedom at the end of the tunnel, to have built not just, a job, self-employment, but actually have built a company that, I play a role in, in building process and the future growth of the company. But the company itself actually, runs the same whether I'm in the building or not. And we have lots of, we run off Monday.com as an operating system, and, Slack and all those things. So, typically I'm always connected whether I'm in the building or not to a certain degree. But yeah, we've had a big change over the past 2 years, I would say, in, that, I guess maturity as an organization. And yeah, it was something that we had to go through that process at some time. And I'm really glad that, we've started to make those steps.
Yeah, well, I think it's working out for you because you've been nominated and won a handful of awards now in Atlantic Canada here, whether it's Chamber of Commerce Awards or what have you. What do you think, and this might sound a little weird, but what do you think makes the East Coast so underrated, and why are you making a bet there, other than the fact that you're from the East Coast?
I'll tell you, man, Atlantic Canada is my favorite place in the world. There's no better place to be in the summer. It's a little chilly and snowy in the winter, but it's home. But I think it's a profoundly great place, to grow up. And the story that we were told here on the East Coast as we were growing up was that you did have to move away to Ontario or to out west for opportunities. But there's been a big shift, in the last, 5 years. The East Coast has started to actually become one of the fastest growing areas of the country. So PEI is the fastest growing province per capita. The other Atlantic provinces aren't far behind. Halifax, where we do some work, and I have spent quite a bit of time there as well, is now the fastest growing city per capita in the country, is my understanding. So there's been this big shift. And I had the opportunity to speak with, so UPI's Business Society does a luncheon each year, and I spoke with the crowd there, and that's really what I focused on, is this change, where, we have so many people moving, not only from outside the country, but from other parts of Canada. We've actually now been discovered, and business and industry is growing really quick here as well. So I think that, there's never been a better time, to be on the East Coast. We have a lot of folks that are moving out here, and it's a really exciting place to be.
I believe it. I ran into my first year college roommate, guy who I was really good friends with in high school, last weekend or week before, and he and his wife have just moved out to Fredericton, and
Nice.
He's a doctor, and so I can see the shift happening for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some big things, like, the cost of living can be quite a bit lower out here. People are really friendly. You're a lot closer to nature. Where I'm from on Prince Edward Island, you drive about 15 minutes any direction. You can be at the beach. And it's really one of those things. It's like, where can you, leave your downtown office and be at the beach in 20 minutes? It's, like I said, it's paradise in the summer. I'm a big fan. But, it's nice we talked about how we're in this era of connectivity with technology, but also, just in terms of, transportation, kind of with the advent of the lower cost carriers here in Canada. Flair is now becoming part of WestJet, but with Flair and Swoop, for $49 in a few hours, I can be downtown Toronto out of Charlottetown. So, a lot of entrepreneurs on the East Coast and some mentors of mine have kind of pointed that out. if this is a great place to live, work, and grow, but we have access to Toronto, we have access to the big markets. So for our company, that balance has played really well, because we do quite a bit of work in Ontario as well.
There you go. I know you've gotten more into speaking a little bit as the business has grown, and you talked about talking at UPAI at their luncheon and a handful of other things. What advice do you generally try to give to the young entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs early in their journey as you talk to those crowds?
I think it kind of depends on kind of the room that you're in, certainly. But one thing that I kind of touched on a little bit earlier is, I think when you're a teenager in your earlier 20s, that's a time to try a lot of different things. Whether it's travel or it's different business ideas, different, career paths. But it's when you get a little bit older and you find that thing that's kind of your fit and really, it doesn't feel like work, that's the time to really focus. And that's kind of what we did, in our earlier years. We talked about, I used to do some video stuff, and we actually used to do events too. We had this sports league, and we used to do concerts and had a lot of fun with that. But it's try lots of things and see what's the fit. And then, there comes a time to really start to kind of narrow down and focus. And then the other thing is just, find mentors, and peers. We talked about kind of the value of those peer networks. But certainly, I owe a great deal to a number of mentors in the business community on PEI that, from the time I was in high school would take the time to have a coffee with me a few times a year. And that's something where I try to pay it forward when I can. It's the advice I was given was find a mentor, be a mentor, and, respect their time. But I found that, people are so generous with their time, when they see a younger entrepreneur that's going through, those first steps and, they're in the trenches. And that's actually, it was a mentor that, kind of made the introduction that I was able to join the Wallace McCain Institute. So that's been, a really kind of big kind of life moment for me. So those are a couple of things, but it depends on the room. And, I think from the time of 5, I was the kid that always had too much to say. So, it's, as my friends say, I never met a microphone I didn't like.
Yeah, that was definitely something that I picked up the couple episodes back. I interviewed my uncle, who's a Grammy award-winning music producer, and he said that his favorite moments on when he's producing or whatever he's doing, it's always when someone comes up to him after they're finished making the record and they say, "You made me a better musician because I worked with you," or "I learned this thing that I didn't know before," or something to that nature. It's not the making the hit records or putting out a good final product. It's part of that learning and the teaching that is really where the fulfillment comes as part of your career. So
yeah, exactly. It's all about relationships.
Okay, last question. What is your favorite piece of brotherly advice that you've ever given? If he listens to any of it. Because I know my brother does not.
Doesn't listen to any of it. And it's interesting because I have some friends that, have brothers that are, maybe 2 years in the age gap. And it's a bit different when, there's a 7-year age gap. I say, actually, it's only been this last few years that he actually seemed like a real person. But, well, I mean, the single biggest thing that I think, I'm really proud of him. And also, jealous in the way that I got to wish I had the chance to do it was, so I backpacked in my early mid-20s. And I remember, so on PEI, you need 24 high school graduates or high school credits to graduate. If you do all your courses, by the end of first semester grade 12, you have 20. So you need 20. You could get up to 24. So we actually figured out a way where he could do an independent study course his second half of grade 12 and go backpack Asia for 3 months. And I remember he kind of pitched it and that sort of thing, and it's like, hey, go for it. We'll see if they'll let you do that. And to I think everyone's surprise, not the least of which being my parents, he actually got the green light from his school to go do that. So that was, I was going over, it could have even been a trip that I would have seen you. And my brother actually flew over with me, on a one-way ticket into Bangkok, and spent about 2 days with me before I went south to shoot video. And he got on a train with some Australian guys he had met to go north to Chiang Mai. And that was something that, it's a pretty special life moment, but he really grabbed the bull by the horns. So it's, I'm a really proud brother, and, he's gone on to do a lot of really cool things in video and photography that I kind of didn't get the chance to do because I got tied up with the clothing thing. But, he's rocking and rolling and self-employed now at a college. And, pretty lucky to have him as a brother.
If people want to connect with you or Stay Golden, where should they go?
So we're Stay Golden Custom on Instagram. We're staygolden.ca. Pretty easy to find on the internet. I'm at Coltin Handrahan. It's a bunch of words. Maybe we can put it on the screen. Coltin, because my mom wanted me to be a special snowflake. But yeah, Stay Golden Custom. It's probably the easiest place to find us. And always looking for new folks to work with. We ship Canada wide from the East Coast. And always looking for people to chat with. If you're ever on the East Coast, certainly reach out. I spend my time in Charlottetown and Halifax, and anyone that's interested in that entrepreneurial journey, always down to grab a coffee and chat.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for having me, Blake. Really great to catch up.